Hey guys, Zom Fox here, and today we're going to be doing my power rankings for the 2023 USFL season heading into week 2, so my week 2 power rankings. Naturally, this is going to be the overreact and underreact week as we have finally seen these teams actually play football last week. So, without further ado, let's just get started with the Houston Gamblers at 8. This shouldn't come as a shock to anyone. I had them at 8 last week, and I said that because their defense was going to be a lot worse than last year, and their offense would take a step back as well. And let's just say I was right on both those fronts. This team was not that good this week. Now, Mark Thompson wasn't able to play, so there is that, but I don't think that's enough to do justice for how bad this team looked in a lot of ways. Now, the end score wasn't horrid. They only lost by 16, which is still pretty bad. But once you get to the numbers, you realize how bad it was. The team had 4 turnovers. And as you might guess, that was the most. In fact, no other team turned the ball over 3 times. They turned it over 4 times. So they had 2 fumbles lost and 2 interceptions thrown. Not the best look for them. And to make it even worse, in their total yardage, they had 194. That total of 194, let's just put it simply, only 2 teams in the entire league failed to get 280 yards, and they're both the bottom 2 teams this week. So while they didn't have the worst total yardage, they still were up there and was overall really, really bad, especially when the other team that's in question had 2 less drives than them. So, to put it simply, the Gamblers did not look that good. They tried to put in Terry Wilson for a bit. He looked terrible. Essentially, everything just looked bad for them. There was nothing about this team, this game, that actually made you think, oh yeah, this team's really going to do it. Nah, it looked exactly like I expected them to. It looked like there were some real problems with this team heading into the season, mainly due to the fact they didn't have some of the guys that were there last year on defense, but they also were really missing those guys that were on offense last year. I think the fact is Clayton Thorson, like I said at some of the videos last year, he might not have been this, insanely great player, but he was a solid, okay quarterback. With him being gone, it kind of hurt them a lot. And you saw that with the offense, it just wasn't great. It was not great. They really did not look too good. So, man, I think that this team, we all saw it coming that they weren't going to be as good as they were last year, and it's not even like they were great last year. But, man, you talking about some really poor stats, and it's a shame. But number 8 they are, and I don't think this should shock anyone. Now, coming in at number 7 is the Pittsburgh Maulers. The other team to fail to get 200 yards. In fact, they didn't even get 160 yards. They only got 156, so they only had 9 drives. But still, they didn't even hold the ball much. They had the ball for less than 23 minutes. It was just not great. And the thing is that this offense is one of those that still needs to gel a bit because they have completely new quarterbacks and all that. But the problem is their quarterbacks looked terrible. Both Morgan and Williams really didn't look that good. They both had sub 55 QB quarterback ratings. They both just overall weren't good. They had 40 and 33 completion percentages. Remember, this is a team that still has Bailey Gaither on it. So it's not like, and they still have Madre London and Garrett Groshek. So it's not like they're, completely out on either short pass options or deep threats. No, they have options. It just wasn't good. Now, yeah, the O-line wasn't the most, insane. But it's not like the Breakers really did a ton. There were other quarterbacks pressured more than these guys were. And it's bad. The only reason I don't have them below the Gamblers is really just because I think that this is more so of the team gelling together, whereas the Gamblers, you could just say they are this way. So I think the Maulers could get better. And the fact is that their coaching still seems to be pretty weak. Ray Horton had some questionable decisions, especially late in the game. And this team was really only in it due to, a really lucky punt return. And of course, the big deal is the fact that their kicker was, let's just call it like it is, really bad. The kicker missed multiple kicks in the game, and that really hurt them in the end, as if he makes even one of those, the game could have been completely different. If he makes both his kicks, that's another 4 points for the Maulers, which puts them at only down by 3 in that final drive. But, I don't know. It didn't look too great. Basically, everyone on the team looked pretty bad. I mean, Groshek and London both averaged under 3.5 yards per carry. It wasn't the best game for them. The fact is that the Maulers weren't really expected to be that good anyway, at least to me. And while they did look better than they did last year, that's really not saying much. But I think that number 7 is a fair spot for them. They really weren't awful, like in a horrific sense, but man, they didn't look good. Now, coming in number 6 is one that might be a bit controversial. I have the Breakers at 6. I didn't move them up, and give me a second to explain. I know that some of you guys are Breakers fans are going to be very salty about this, but yes, I have them at 6. Let's just get the big elephant out of the room. They beat the Maulers. They did not beat any of those top teams. Like I said in my, predictions and all that, I predicted there were going to be 2 teams that would not be competing for the playoffs, and that would be the Maulers and the Gamblers. I said every other team will be at least competing for it, but those 2 teams. So the Breakers beat one of those 2 teams, and they didn't even beat them soundly. Yes, the defense did look solid, I will say that, but let's be real. If they don't have a kicker, that's just automatic, as Conklin was. Does this team really win this game? No. But because of the fact that Conklin just, casually made 5 of 5 field goals and won Special Teams Player of the Week, they were able to win this game. Bethel Thompson, though, he did look pretty solid. Not awesome, but solid. He had over 50 completion percentage. He threw the ball 40 times, which, for Spring League football is insane. And the dude did have an over 87 quarterback rating, as well as, proving that he did have some legs on him. The team didn't really run the ball much. Jones was the only rusher, and he rushed 19 times for overall pretty bad yardage, and that's something that does hurt. Sage Surratt, though, man, I thought he was going to be great for the Stallions last year, but man, he looks great for the Breakers this year. 85 yards. They had 3 guys with over 50 yards receiving, which is a great sign, especially since none of those guys were from just one deep pass. They all had at least 3 receptions. So I will say the team does look pretty solid. It's just, I think there's some question. The fact that they only had 1 running back in the game was really, really questionable. And while you got to give credit for the great story that DeFilippo had of everything about what he came back from to be able to run on the field and all that, the fact is I have the Breakers at 6. I don't want to overreact too much, and I really don't think that they should be moved higher yet. I know some people say, well, what about, the 2 teams that lost? I think we all know that at least from week 1, the Showboats did look better than the Breakers. They just did, especially since they played, the Stars. And the Generals, I think that the Generals, well, I'll get to them in a second, but I think the Breakers, I think that they are definitely on the upper track. It's just I don't have them high enough yet. If they have another game where they're able to actually put touchdowns together instead of a touchdown and, being stopped all the time, be a big deal. Naturally, this team didn't gel a ton. It wasn't too cohesive on offense, but that's to be expected with a new quarterback and a new head coach. But Bethel Thompson proved that, veteran savvy by being able to actually gel faster than other guys. I think that 6 is a fair spot for them right now. I think there's a very real shot that next week they move up to 5 and potentially even 4. But it's just, I don't want to overreact and put them higher. They beat the Maulers, which isn't that big an accomplishment. So I'm going to keep them here at 6. Coming in at 5 is the one that everyone's going to be like, whoa, are you really putting them there? Yes, I am. The New Jersey Generals. I am having the Generals stay at 5. Well, not stay at 5. They moved down 2 spots and are the biggest droppers of any team. But there is a reason for it. The fact is that the Generals were beat by the Stallions, who a lot of people have as the best team, or at least the top 2 team, and that the score was a lot closer than it says. There were multiple turnovers on downs late in the game for the Generals, where if they had just gotten a couple more yards, this game could have been a lot closer, or if not, the Generals winning. And I think a big thing is looking at the stats of these guys from last year. Now, when you see the score, you think that they did terrible. Well, if you compare what Prukop and Johnson did this year to what Perez and Johnson did last year, the stat lines are very similar minus the touchdown, with the only notable thing being Johnson doing slightly worse on both rushing and passing. If Johnson just does a little bit better, which I think he will get a bit better naturally next week, just like he did last year. It's just like last year, he started off with a really bad completion percentage and all that, and ended the season as one of the best passers in the league. And Prukop, just like Perez, started immediately looking like a great passer. So I think that in terms of their offense, their offense is going to be fine. The fact is that Trey Williams did not really play and do anything. So they also were missing one of their best weapons on offense. So I think that all things considered, this team is still good enough to win games and I think compete for a playoff spot. I think too many people are just going way too much on the overreaction side of this team. Williams did not play. They were still able to have overall some decent stat lines, and it's not like this team got completely pummeled. They still were able to get over 360 yards of total offense, which is insane. They got offense put out, and I believe they were the most gaining team on offense. So the team offense is still there. They just didn't get the touchdowns like they needed to. So I think that people are overreacting to Generals. Now, if they come out next week and they look insanely flat and all that, then yes, that will be something that needs to be discussed. But I think the fact is that this team has been overreacted about by a ton. They're still solid. It's just that they played a better team and they couldn't get some touchdown drives done when it mattered. And I think that's making a lot of people think their team is bad. No, their team can still have a great offense. The defense did look a lot more suspect than did last year. But I think that they deserve to still be higher than the Breakers because their offense shows that it still has what it had last year. It just might need another week to get together. Whereas I think the Breakers, they need to prove their offense is together, if you know what I mean. So I know it might be controversial, but I'm going to stick with it. The Generals are going to be at 5. Coming in at number 4 is the highest team without a win in the Memphis Showboats. I have the Showboats moving up one spot, and I think that this is pretty fair. The Showboats put on a really good fight for their home crowd against the Stars. They really did. They almost came away with the W, but they ended up just falling short at the end. The fact is that the Stars and the Stallions are the two best teams, and teams need to beat them to prove they're legit contenders. The fact is that the Showboats, they competed really well. They had a couple of big miscues which ended up hurting them. They had an interception, a missed field goal, and a missed extra point. The missed extra point is the one that hurt the most because in their final drive they were forced to have to score a touchdown rather than a field goal. So they were having to, play the clock out a lot harder than you would if you were only going for a field goal. And that really is what ended up costing them in the end. But the fact is that the Showboats did have some help from penalties by the Stars, but they overall looked really solid. Brady White may have had an early miscue at the interception, but aside from that early miscue at the interception, he was great. 16 of 29 isn't the best, 55 completion percentage, but 180 yards, 2 TDs to the pick, and like I said, the pick was in the first drive. And he looked better than Kelly did overall in the little that Kelly played. But the real thing was Alex Collins. Alex Collins looked awesome. His 14 attempts for 63 yards don't really do him justice because he had a couple really short runs in the goal line. He was a beast. Dude is going to be a menace for the league. So overall, I think the Showboats, they looked pretty good, all things considered. Their defense got a good amount of sacks too. Their defense had 5 sacks in the game, which is always a great thing. Derek Dillon continued to look great in kick returns. It's just everything about them except their kicking game really was great. I think that's the fact that needs to be brought up, is that they had a couple blocked kicks, they blocked a couple kicks, which really helped, but they missed kicks, which is not what you want to see. So I think that the fact is that the Showboats, they put up a really great fight against a team that is one of the elite of the league, and so I think you got to give credit to them. In fact, they beat them in some, if you go look at the stats, they beat them in some offensive stats as well. They had more yards. They had more yards per play. They just overall were really solid and competitive. It's just that you had a pick that really hurt you early on because after that interception, it allowed for the Stars to get an easy touchdown. But, they were able to keep this game close way longer than you would expect them to. And if it wasn't for a missed extra point, this game could have gone to OT. I think the Showboats really showed they are legit this year. So I think that them being at 4 is definitely fair for them. Now, coming in at number 3 is the Michigan Panthers. Man, I'm glad the Panthers don't suck. As you saw my community post earlier today, I finally got some Panthers merch that came in. And I'm really glad. It's great. They were... Let's put it, objectively, they looked awesome, and subjectively, they looked awesome. Really, let's put it this way, Carson Strong came in and threw 5 passes, and he got all of them completed. Yet even that wasn't good enough to make you say, wow, Carson Strong looks great. Because Josh Love went 18 for 20. I think it was originally like 19 for 21, but I think they took one of his screen passes away. But he went 18 for 20 for 90 completion percentage, which is a USFL record for a single game, minimum 10 attempts. And that goes back to the 80s USFL, which is insane. He had 3 touchdowns. He had a 151 quarterback rating. Remember, they say QBR, but they're doing the passer rating stat. So he almost had a perfect game. The dude was a monster. And the fact is that Josh Love easily won that Offensive Player of the Week. But the thing that's incredible is that he probably wasn't even the best player on the field today. Breland Speaks, my guy, was unbelievable. He had 4 solo tackles, 7 total, 2 TFLs, and not 1, not 2, but 3 sacks. That's insane. He was unbelievable today. He also forced a fumble. I mean, Breland Speaks he went off today. Or a couple days ago. He had an unbelievable game. And the fact is that this game wasn't as close as it could be because Cole Murphy, their kicker, missed a couple extra points. But even with that, they still were able to win by 16. The fact is that everyone looked good. Reggie Corbin, who was supposed to be the big running back for them, wasn't even their biggest player, as Stevie Scott played better than him, another returner. He had over 5 yards a carry with 12 attempts and a touchdown. And he only had his longest rush be 17 yards. Essentially, every facet, the Panthers looked great, but special teams. But their kicking game, they looked unbelievable. You had 2 Player of the Weeks. You had unbelievable stats. You were able to capitalize and get turnovers. They looked great. The fact is, the Panthers, a lot of people now have them as a legit contender. And while this might be the overreact of the week, the fact is that, man, when you have your backup quarterback coming in and going 5 for 5 and he doesn't even look as good as your starter, that says just how good your quarterback group is. So I think the fact is the Panthers are going to be set at either guy at quarterback. They have 2 running backs who on any given night can be really good. And it's just everything about them was great. They had a 100-yard receiver. They had awesome defense. I think that the fact is that this team looks great. They definitely deserve to be in the top 3. But the top 2, I think everyone knows who they are. It's just who do you have, and I have the Stallions at 2. The Stallions come in at number 2. I don't think their win... it's hard. Their win, I don't think, was as impressive as the Stars win, which might be a bit controversial. But one team was playing against a home field. One of them had a home field. One of them played a team that, after watching a week, looks worse than the other team did. As well as the fact that, like I said, the Generals kept this game a lot closer than the score says. I'm going to have the Stallions here. I think another thing is the injuries. Let's just get it out of the way. Marlon Williams, hope for a speedy recovery, man. He's out for the year already. He was supposed to be the receiver. They lost both Osiris Mitchell and Victor Bolden, with, Osiris Mitchell going to the Showboats. But they lost both of them, and so Marlon was supposed to be the number 1, which he was last year, to be fair, but in an even more sense of the number 1. He's out for the year. So they're already hit really hard there. And Jamar had another injury, and Scooby did. I don't think either of them are serious injuries, but they both did have minor injuries. So that could hurt. But I think that without Marlon, the offense is going to be a bit worse. And the fact is that when you look at their offense as well, their running game was really poor. I mean, Maribel was their best rusher in terms of a running back, and he was terrible because their best rusher was Alex Magoo. And just like last year, Magoo proved that he is just as solid as Smith, though I think Smith is a bit better, but solid as he can just come in and do great. I mean, when you look at the offense between the two of them, I mean, they went 17-26 for a 65 completion percentage, 220 yards, and 8.8 yards per attempt, and then 2 touchdowns to 1 pick. They both had over a 90 quarterback rating. If it wasn't for the interception, Jamar would have had a 110 as well, which is what Alex Magoo had. They both proved that, just like last year, either one of them can do good and win. Bo Scarborough was pretty disappointing. He was the biggest disappointment of the day. Jay Sternberger, dude was great. His 5 receptions for 62 yards was great. And then, of course, Brandon Aubrey, to nobody's surprise, made every single kick he attempted. I mean, is that really a shock to anyone at this point? So the fact is the team looked really solid, but I think that the injuries are going to potentially be a big deal, especially the Marlon Williams injury. So I think that along with the fact that they did have the home field advantage, they do still look like a top team, just not the top team. Because at number 1 is the Philadelphia Stars, the team I still have as winning the title this year. Why? Well, they just looked really good against a great team. The Showboats played in front of a huge crowd, which we don't know the exact numbers, but I think it's more like 20,000, but it's over 15,000. It's not 30,000 like the Kurt Menefee says, but it was definitely like about 20,000. And despite playing in a hostile environment, they came in and got the W. Case Cookus would have won Offensive Player of the Week had it not been for Josh Love. I truly do believe that. Cookus went 20 for 29 with a 69 completion percentage, 212 yards, and 3 touchdowns for a 124.5 quarterback rating, as well as leading his team in rushing at 31 yards total, averaging 4.4. And I mean, come on. Colburn only rushed the ball 5 times, and he still got 30 yards as he averaged 6 yards per attempt. And then they had, Corey Coleman and Devin Gray both looked great at receiver, and so did Roland. I mean, really, this team just looked really, really locked in. They looked like I expected them to, which is they're going to win the title this year. That's what they looked like. They came in, and they had a mission, and they did it. There was some blocked kicks, which made this game a lot closer than it was, like I said. If Aguilar doesn't get his kick blocked, because I think he had both an extra point and a field goal blocked, though he might have missed the extra point, but the kick was blocked. So if it wasn't for those blocks, you're talking about them winning by like maybe a full touchdown, and if not even more potentially. So it's just, they really did look great. And the fact is that this is a team that we expected that would be good, and they proved it. They went out there and they had a great game. The only thing you could say is that you wish they would have had a sack. They didn't have any sacks, but they did get an interception, and they didn't turn the ball over, which is a huge deal. If you're not turning the ball over, you're going to win games. They didn't turn the ball over. Cookus was incredible, and everything worked out. I think that it's pretty clear that this Stars team is legit, and they will probably win the title, at least to me. I think there's a good chance that they do win the North, and they might win it outright. They might win the North outright and win the division as well as the playoffs. We'll see for that. Overall, this has been ZomFox. If you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bells. We're going to have about at least 3 videos per week during the season, as either tomorrow or Thursday, my week review video will be out, and then, of course, Friday we'll have my betting picks, and every week we might have some random video that comes out. So make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, and as always, have a great night.